Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. My name is David Baer, and today we're going to be chatting about the subject of relationships. Now, I'm not talking about personal relationships. Well, I am talking about personal relationships. I was thinking the other day that we often say in our business that marketing is everything, by which, every activity, every encounter that a customer has with your business, no matter where, whether it's a postcard they receive in the mail, a customer service phone call, using your service or your products, right? That's a marketing opportunity. And if you think about the concept of the transitive properties, our guest today believes that relationship is everything. And if she's right, well, then that means that marketing is all about relationship. I hope that's true, because that's what we're going to be talking about in the next little while with our guest, Rena Chiovelli, who's joining me from Edmonton in Alberta. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. That was a great way to introduce the topic.
So I had this opportunity to hang out and look at your website for a little bit, and your positioning on the very front page of the website is all about how very differently you approach marketing. And to a lot of people, relationship is not the very first thing they think about when it comes to marketing. They will think about all kinds of things like, what's my website, or what tactic am I going to invest in to get people to, come to my business? But you have a different take. Why don't you share your take?
Yeah, thanks. So I do have a different take in that, but it's really just a little bit of a shift in how we think about it. So what I would say is that really, like you were saying, everything that we do is marketing, right? But really what I think the people should say, instead of what can I do to enhance my marketing, or what can I do to get people in the door, what can I do for this and that from the marketing standpoint, just switch that word to relationship in your mind, right? Because relationship is the core of marketing. And if you think about it as, what can I say to help build the relationship with the people that I want to serve? That's a lot different sounding, and you will certainly get, I think, a much more important answer than what can I say to market myself better to people, right? So that's the essence of how I work and how we work at my agency, is through building relationships. And I know relationship is a little bit of a buzzword, especially in content marketing, like and trust factor and all that, but people will often still look at that as like a tactic-based sort of transaction. So really what I really encourage people to do, and I encourage marketing agencies to do this as well with their clients, but this is something that we do with our clients, which is really work on relationships to the three pillars of your values, your story, and vulnerability.
Okay, I want to dive into those three pieces a little bit more, because I think I understood the first two. Vulnerability I can understand, but I want to understand how you apply it. So will you walk us through those three pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with values, because I think values is a really important place to start, because if you don't really know what your values are, you're going to have a hard time really connecting with people. I think values is really where we can emotionally connect with the people that, we want to bring into our sphere, with the people that we want to serve with our product or service. So when we focus on values, again, that's a relationship thing. When we meet somebody, when we start dating, what do we start looking at, right? Do we look at what kind of food that they like? Or do we actually look at the values that they have, and do they align with ours, right? So it's really the same, right? In a bit of a different context.
Yep.
When you're looking at a business, serving a customer or a client, right? The clients and the customers may not know this on a conscious level, but they're really looking for people and businesses who, especially since the pandemic, actually, who align with their values. Right? So they may not know that consciously, but subconsciously, that's what's happening. And as soon as they key into something that aligns with the value that they hold really important, they're hooked in, and you have their attention. right? So to me, that's the most important piece to work with.
Okay.
I can move
So
on to
yeah, I was going to ask a little bit more about value. So obviously, there's the things that really stand out in terms of the nature of the business, whether they are charitable and supporting causes, whether they are, in a local setting, active in the community. But obviously, there's those are the things that are out in front, right? Which are, as I said, everything is marketing. Well, those could be, marketing and relationship building activities. But what would you say is probably under the surface? I mean, those are the obvious ones, but maybe something that is less obvious to a business in terms of the way that a prospect or consumer might relate to them.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because a lot of times when I started with clients and I ask them, what are some of your values? Let's talk about your values. And they're like, oh, I really like honesty and integrity. And I'm like, okay, so let's get under that, right? Because honesty and integrity is a bit generic. They're buzzwords. They're great intended words, but they're not enough to really, like, what is it about the honesty or about the integrity that you actually value? Like, let's get under that. So we have those longer discussions. So, for example, I work with a local greenhouse and, she was having issues getting people in because they're outside the city limits. So it's a little bit of a drive, right? So she really wanted to get new customers in, particularly from the city that was only a 20-minute drive away. And after working with her for, quite a while, we've really come to narrow down and discuss her values online a lot. And it's something that is really bringing people in. It's that whole local factor. Her plants are more expensive than big box stores, period. They just are. But why are they? Because they put in tender, loving care to these plants like they're children. I mean, they actually speak about their plants like, we're adopting our plants out starting today. Like, we're open and they're looking for their forever homes. Like, please come get them. And they will talk all day long, both online and offline, about how they care for these plants, how they've grown many of them from seed, which is also unusual in the nursery business, right? A lot of people just get stuff sent to them ready to sell, right? So they grow the plant from seed to sell, and they care for it, and they have to deal with the watering and the fertilizing and the pruning and all of this sort of stuff. And they talk about it a lot. So that's a value where if you're somebody who just doesn't really care that much about where the flowers come from, and they just, you're looking for a bargain, probably not the customer they're talking to. But who they are talking to are very interested in this, are very engaged and very supportive in coming out to buy these flowers because they care about the longevity of the flower. They care about the health of the plant. They care about the disease resistance of the plant. They know the value of getting a plant that will produce, if it's a fruit bearing tree or if it's a vegetable, that will produce more at the end of the season than one that won't. They care about plants lasting longer into the season, all of that sort of thing. So that's an example of a value that's really important for that business that will connect with gardeners who carry that same value.
I love that. I love that example because it really, speaks not only to the concept of value, but also the application of the messaging and the language that they're using to really make that connection with somebody for whom that matters.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So what is the second piece?
Well, the second piece is something that we're all familiar with, which is that keyword or that buzzword, story, again, right? Story is really important. I think it always has been and it always will be. And a lot of people struggle with, though, what does story really mean for me or for my business? Like, what people don't understand is that they think that a story has to be this big, elaborate story of triumph or of tribulation or something for it to qualify as a story that's worthy of being told on a website or on social media. And in fact, it really isn't. A story is just an explanation of something that happens, day to day for the business. And what that does is it personalizes the business. It gives the business a persona, and it allows people to really see sort of like what the back end of that business is or what the story is of that business, right? So when people are thinking about story, if you have a big elaborate story you want to share, great, there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. But if you're worried that your story isn't enough, do not underestimate the importance of your knowledge to other people, the importance of the day-to-day stuff that your business does and goes through, right, on a day-to-day basis to people, because the things you take for granted as knowledge or as interesting are actually extremely interesting, for your customers and for your client base.
This is so true, and I encountered a business owner recently who was surprised to hear this. So I live near Oregon wine country, and I was out visiting a winery recently, and I was curious to learn a little bit about it because I knew that the property had just been sold and there were new owners, and I wanted to kind of hear their story. I wanted to know what they were all about. So I went to their website, and there was nothing about them. Nothing, right? They talked about the wines. They talked about a bunch of facts that really were not of any interest to me as a consumer about,
Right.
The exposure of the hillside that they're on, and all of these, things that are technically of interest maybe to somebody who's interested in wine. And when I got there and I met the owner, I said, I was missing this from your website. Like, how did you come to be the owners of this place? Why are you, why do you own a winery? Where'd you come from? I want to know. And she's like, oh no, that's so boring. Nobody'd be interested in that. And one of her employees turned to her and said, see, I told you they care about that stuff.
Yes. And I hear that from so many people, those literal words. No one's going to find that interesting. Who cares? Right. So my advice is, if that's something you're saying, that's exactly what you need to post about. If you're saying no one's interested in that, stop yourself, catch yourself and say, oh, I think I need to post this because I heard on David's podcast that this is actually important and people will really care. Post it with a fun picture. And it can be like, again, the simplest thing. I work with a home renovation company, local guy, does really great work, worked with him for a long time. And, we recently just posted a picture of him and just a little bit of background about, now, we've been around for a couple of years with him online. Most of the people, we interact with know who he is, but it's always good to do those revisits, right? As to who we are, like actual literally who we are, and use a picture. But, that post got more engagement than probably any other post that we've done in the quarter by far. Right. And it was because it was a little something about him, talking a little bit about things that he likes, a little bit about what's important to him with the picture. And again, while it wasn't a big elaborate story, it tells the story of the business in a small way that engages people and makes them actually, put a face to a name, certainly in this context, but also just really care about, start caring more about this business and what they're doing.
So if we bring this concept of story back to where we started around the point of relationship, it sounds like it can be incredibly powerful because you're able to dimensionalize what the business is, right? It's no longer a commodity. It's now a person who has experiences that you may connect with, or you may know somebody who is, has a similar background, and suddenly that can enhance the type of relationship that, a person doesn't really have a relationship with a business. They have relationships with people in the business. So this helps support that, I imagine.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that's another really good key point to building relationship online, is that it is actually a two-way street, right? That back and forth engagement is really what you want to go for. And people don't often understand how that can look. Maybe on social media, it's an easier concept to conceptualize. Okay, I'm going to try to get people to comment. Well, you're going to try to get them to comment, or you're going to have a conversation with them, or you're going to start something that's important to them where you're actually having conversations. So that's a little tweak again in how you can think about things differently. But in all content platforms, there's ways that you can do that, right? There's ways that you can create that two-way conversation into that story, right? The story that you're telling, and then you want to make it interactive so that people want to respond back with, I totally understand what you're saying. This has been my experience too, whatever it is. Or, in the instance of the greenhouse, we'll often have people posting their pictures unsolicited in the comment section of, some post that we've done about something. And they'll say, look, these are the plants I bought from you 2 months ago. Aren't they beautiful? And all of a sudden it starts this big cascade of like friendly competition where more and more people are commenting their pictures of their plants that they bought there. Right. As a like, oh yeah, look at mine. Mine are great too. And oh, well, look at these. And it's so great because it's not just about the business then just talking to like one customer. It's about this community forming.
Yeah.
Right. And when that starts to happen, then you've hit a home run and you're completely in the right place.
I was thinking about this idea of community as you were telling that story, and thinking, businesses have the opportunity to leverage community when they have relationship. When they don't, it's a lot harder. And community doesn't have to be a Facebook group or events in your place of business. It can be simply interaction among multiple people, multiple fans and supporters and or clientele. And I love this approach to really getting engagement and support from your community of consumers, of buyers, of customers.
Exactly. And a lot of brick and mortar type businesses who, they have a brick and mortar place and they're playing around online and they're trying to figure out how to get their online presence a little bit better, can remember that if you already have a community within your business, and a lot of them do, right? Massage therapy place that I work with, they have their whole concept is community, but they didn't actually realize that until we started talking a bit more,
Yeah.
right? And they realize like, oh wow, community is actually a huge part. It's a part of their values, right? They don't want to just be the massage therapy place. They want to be the overall wellness place. They want to be the place people come to sit down and talk with each other and hang out, for other things. They want to give back to the community in which they're located, right? By contributing to events or holding events or that kind of thing. So, it's different for every business, but that's like a prime example of using the concept of community. And so what we did after talking with them is we translated that to all of their online content, right? And to their story, because then it becomes more than just another massage therapy place in Calgary, Alberta, right?
Yeah.
Right. It becomes a massage therapy place that has this great story about this local owner that is a really big part of this cute little trendy community in Calgary, and does all these things, and also has all these extra things within their, within their brick and mortar, right, where people can sit and have conversation and receive other services and that kind of thing. So
yeah, to point of differentiation to the extreme, as opposed to we use this type of oil or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And factual things can be okay, but they're not what you should lead with, right? If you have an interesting fact about something, it's okay to throw those in as posts, but some people make the mistake of thinking that's the only thing that people want to read, and it becomes very dry sounding because it's not backed up with any sense of value or story. Yeah.
So the third one, and the one that piqued my interest the most, was the vulnerability. I can't even say the word, but you know what I mean. Vulnerability. Can you go a little bit deeper into that one?
Yeah, and it certainly makes people uncomfortable even seeing the word, right? They're like, what, this isn't a Brene Brown session. Like, why are we talking about vulnerability here? We're a business. So again, similar to what I said about story, it doesn't need to be a big traumatic or triumphant story. It doesn't need, your vulnerability as a business also doesn't need to be this big elaborate vulnerability or even overshare, right? Like, there are lines and they change for everybody. But what I will say is you would be surprised what business owners and businesses feel is vulnerable, right? Okay. So I want to caution people that if you're thinking, I really want to share this simple piece of information, but I'm feeling really uncomfortable about it because it feels a bit vulnerable. And it might be something as simple as I have our business has an opinion on something that might be a little bit different than what the rest of the industry thinks, as an example, and they're not sure whether or not they should say it. Right? That's an example of something that I would say is a vulnerability, because you're sharing an authentic piece of your business, right? And you're not used to doing that, and putting it in writing is a lot harder than just talking about it to somebody face to face. But that's what I mean by vulnerability. It can be something smaller in scale, right? But if it feels kind of like, oh, I don't know about posting that, and that's when you know it's a vulnerability. And I would encourage you to explore that more and to share those things more, because it does become easier over time. And again, that's the kind of thing that allows people into your world, gets them to see what your value system are in a better way, gets them to understand your story in a better way, and connect with you in that way.
There's this concept that I'm sure you're familiar with about being polarizing to a certain extent, because it helps get people closer to you who agree. And obviously, I think one of the fears that a lot of businesses have is, well, if I'm polarizing or I'm strongly opinionated about something, I'm going to lose some people.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on that. And again, a lot of it is contextual and it's based on case by case. I definitely don't, a lot of marketers will advocate for the polarization and to go at things in a really heavy way. I don't usually have that opinion. Again, it's case by case. I do think that it's okay to have an opinion on something and to voice it in a way that's respectful and grounded, in your own purpose and in your own values of your business. If you already have your values established and they're very clear for people, your opinion on something is likely not going to surprise them too much, if at all, right? Because it's going to align with what they already know about you. So doing something for the sake of being polarizing is a definite no in my books. Like, you could do that, but that's not the kind of marketing I like.
Well, here's an example of, I think, where it could apply, and I'm curious to know if you would agree or disagree with this. If you go back to the nursery and the raising, a plant from seed is philosophically, what they believe. And so if they were to lean into that further by talking about the benefit of doing it that way and why, the big commercial nurseries out there aren't providing this benefit to the plant or to you, that could be polarizing, but it would really speak to their values and their story. Is that okay? Is that not okay?
No, I think that's a great example of something that is completely okay. And in fact, that we have done a number of times, or a few times, right? So again, it's how you word things and it's what your intention is of doing something. We certainly don't blast anything out that says box stores are bad, you're cheap if you shop there. I mean, those are ways that we could word things that would be, I think, in intention just to piss people off, if I can say that honestly. Right? So some people do that. Some marketing agencies are like that. That's just not my style, and it's not the style of the clients that I work with. However, the way you described it, in terms of talking about the benefits and why, for them, it's better than going to a big box store, and how, all the benefits of doing it from a local perspective, from an environmental perspective, from a personal perspective. Those are, again, that's exactly right. That's exactly the kind of thing that we, want to translate to people. A good example of this vulnerability actually with this greenhouse, because it just got me thinking about something that happened this winter. Unfortunately, she has two separate greenhouses, and one of them was lost due to heavy snow. It collapsed completely right at the end of winter. It was very upsetting for her. There was a lot of conversation about it, and she said to me, "Should I post about this?" And I was like, "I definitely think you should post about it, but why wouldn't you, right? What's the hang up?" And she said, "I just don't want people to think that we can't serve them as well next year. I don't want them to think that we're going to be too small, that we're not going to have as much variety, blah, 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 blah." All these reasons why. So right there in my head, I thought, oh, this is like a vulnerability for her, right? Something bad happened. It's put her in a vulnerable position. And now she's used to doing this relationship thing, but she's hit something where she's like, I don't know if I want to talk about this bad thing that happened. So of course we walked her through it. She posted. It was a beautiful post. It was viewed. I think we're up to 45,000 times now on her page. Great. I mean, a lot, and like hundreds and hundreds of comments and likes and hearts and all
of support, I imagine, right?
Absolutely, of support. So that might not seem like it was a vulnerable thing to do from the outside looking in, but for her, it was extremely vulnerable. And it took her a while, it took her a couple of days to sort of, in her words, like get it right in terms of what she wanted to say. But most of that was just because she felt vulnerable, posting that this had happened. So.
And I imagine that the first time that something like that happens for a business and they sort of go into it blindly, it's like, it's a scary thing, like the first time a kid gets up on a bicycle and you let go, or that they're, swimming on their own in a pool. Do you have clients who then are more comfortable going back and maybe being more intentional about how to use or reveal things that they might have previously been uncomfortable with?
Yeah, I usually tell people, because a lot of people are worried about oversharing, and I get that, because I do believe there is such thing as oversharing sometimes. And people are like, well, what's the line? How do I know? And the basic way that I explain it to people is, if your story still owns you emotionally, then it's going to be an overshare. But if you own your story, then it's going to be, a good post in vulnerability. And there's a difference. And there's no other way to explain it really that's clear. But when I say that, people seem to get it. If your story owns you, it would be an overshare. But if you own your story and you're past that point where it's emotionally got you, then that's usually the safer time to post and be vulnerable.
Okay. This is an interesting recipe, and I think very useful in terms of sort of conceptually how it applies. I imagine a lot of businesses are going to listen to this and go, well, that's kind of cool, but how do you actually do this, right? How do you translate these concepts into practical activity? And that's what you do. That's what your agency does. You want to talk a little bit about sort of how you take these ideas and transform them into actual pieces of content?
Yeah, absolutely. When we start with clients, the first thing that we do is we really get to know them in terms of what their voice is. So I walk them through what we call a brand voice session, where I talk to them about things like their values. I talk to them certainly about their messaging, about what's important to them. I talk to them about the relationship with their audience. All of these things that, not every agency necessarily cares about or talks about, but it's very important first piece for us, because without that initial knowledge, it is very hard to continue on down that content road. We obviously will do strategy with everybody that we work with, so that we can support them on a month-to-month basis in a way that makes sense to their goals for their business, and in a way that aligns with the values and the vision that they've talked to us about. We translate it to content using that information, and as we go with people, we get to know them more, right? So we grow a relationship with our businesses just like we advocate for them to grow with their clients, right? So over time, it becomes more and more apparent where their vulnerabilities may lie, where their story lies, or what different stories they have that we hadn't yet unearthed. And as we go, it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And sometimes people feel better when someone else can sort of do the dirty work of putting it together and actually posting it. Right? Than them doing it themselves. That's one way to make it easier for yourself, if you're wondering as well. And then, we go from there, and that's how we do it. We usually meet with our clients quarterly to see how things are going. We talk about things like, what's going on in the world of story? Can we talk about this? Should we talk about that? Right? How did this one feel for you? Because it got great feedback. A lot of people will say, I didn't think that when you posted that, anybody would even like it, and it was the most popular post so far, as an example.
So this brings up one area that I think is important for businesses to hear, which is there are metrics that are important, I imagine, and there are metrics which are not. Can you speak to that briefly?
It's like you're reading my mind. Yes. Okay, metrics. Well, we all have our opinions on this as marketers. I really like data. I love to look at, even though I'm an organic marketer and I'm all about relationship, it's not so fluffy as people might think. It's a combination of an art and a science. So I definitely like looking at the data in terms of how things are going based on the goals people have. What is the open rate for an email? What is the click rate for an email campaign? All of that still very much applies to organic marketing. It's like the basis of organic marketing, within the context, though, of doing things in this relationship focused way, right? So vanity metrics would be something like, I have 5,000 people on my email list. That's amazing. But that doesn't mean anything if you only have 100 people opening the email or 50 people opening the email, right? The same goes, and this is when I often will have to sort of block or talk to clients about, which is their social media following, right? My following is at 7,000 people, and now I want it to be 10. And I'm looking at their zero engagement on their pages. I'm doing their audit, and I'm going, why do you want 10,000? So you can have 3,000 more people do nothing. So that would be another vanity metric. It can be great if you have 7,000, highly engaged group or page, but I look, I have clients that have 2,000 people pages. I have clients that have 350 people pages. They're both highly engaged audiences, right? Mm-hmm. Both of those numbers and everything in between for what their audience size is. So I look more at not just likes and hearts. Those are great. That's definitely one way, but comments and shares for me is really where it's at. If somebody takes the time to share something because they thought it was so good or so funny or so important, that's huge. Yeah. A huge conversion. So I do like to get, every time I get a share, I'm like, yes, it's getting shared. I love it when things get shared. So yeah, it's an art and a science. And I try to look at the metrics that actually speak to that two-way engagement and that relationship more than just volume. Yeah. People get too sidetracked with volume.
Makes total sense. In terms of sales or the translation of content into actual, money coming into the business, is that something that you train them to track, or you help them understand the impact of? How does that play?
Well, almost none of them will hire me for that specifically, but they are hiring me for that specifically. Yeah. They just don't know it yet. So I teach them by giving them that feedback and by showing them where it's, where things, so there's different ways you can do that. A lot of email CRMs will actually calculate the total dollar value of conversions, for that particular email, right? And when you're getting a $2,000 email, right, at the end of the day, it's nice to tell the client, hey, we made $2,000 today off that email. Oh my gosh, really? Right? So certainly there are ways to measure that, and that we should measure that. We also do a lot of what I will say is more of the qualitative, which is comments. And I don't mean just online comments. I mean, when people are actually talking to them, comments about seeing things on social media or loving the emails, or I came here because I heard or I saw this many times, right? Or how many people are messaging them on Messenger now that we have, for example, or on Instagram. How many people are messaging them on Instagram because they have a following there, right? And because they have a really good presence there. If that goes way up in a year compared to the almost none they had before, that's a great indicator that what we're doing is working.
That's excellent. All right. Well, I'm looking at the clock. We have exceeded the time that I think we've allotted for our conversation, and there's so much more that we should be digging into. So hopefully we can continue the conversation another time. But for now, where can folks find out more about you and your services over at Mindful Marketing?
Yeah, they can visit us on our website, which is mindfulmarketing.ca. That's the easiest way to get to know a little bit more about us and contact us.
And where are you serving clients? I imagine beyond the borders of where you're located these days.
Yes, absolutely. We have clients all across Canada and the United States, and I've had clients in Dubai in the past and Great Britain. So borders, we are like marketing without borders.
Awesome. I love that. Rena Chiovelli, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing, and the fabulous recipe that you've shared of sort of what the components of relationship marketing are. Really appreciate you and your time and insights.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Indeed, folks, this has been More Perfect Marketing. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please share it with somebody who might benefit. And if you have something nice to say, please share it over on Apple Podcasts. We certainly appreciate it. Until next time, David Baer, More Perfect Marketing. Take care now.